Every year ends the same way. The news goes quiet on food prices for a few months, shoppers relax, and then a harvest fails somewhere on the other side of the planet, and the whole cycle starts again. Right now, in the closing stretch of 2026, we are sitting inside one of those quiet windows. Some of it is genuine relief, some of it is a mirage, wholesale costs that have fallen while the shelf price stayed exactly where it was. And a few categories are actually building toward trouble in early 2027, not away from it. This list is different from anything we have covered before. It is not just about what has gone up. It is about what is genuinely worth stocking before the year closes, using foods that actually survive in a cupboard rather than anything perishable. Every item here had to pass one simple test. Will it still be exactly as good the day you finally open it as it was the day you bought it? That test rules out more of the supermarket than you'd expect. 15 foods, ranked from the least urgent to the one you should be acting on today. Real numbers, real contracts, real harvest data. Let's start at 15. Picture your cupboard during a week when payday feels a long way off and the fridge is basically empty. What's actually going to feed you? For most households, the honest answer is a tin of beans. Number 15 is canned beans, and it earns the bottom spot. Not because it's unimportant, but because it's the most obvious item on this list, the one everybody already half knows they should have more of. Kidney, black, and cannellini beans grown across the US Midwest and Canada are sensitive to the same summer drought stretches that hit maize and soy. And when a dry season squeezes yields, the raw commodity cost creeps into the tin months later. A can of beans, sealed and unopened, comfortably holds its quality for 2 years or more. The only real mistake people make is buying the same variety over and over. Mix in cannellini for stews, black beans for chili, and kidney for a proper cottage pie, so the shelf actually gets used rather than sitting there until the sell-by date sneaks past. Gram for gram, a tin of beans is still one of the cheapest sources of protein and fibre in the entire shop. Cheaper than almost any cut of meat, and it doesn't care whether the freezer's full or the fridge is bare. Here's a number that surprises most people. A tin of tomatoes, sealed and stored properly, is often still perfectly fine well past the date printed on the label, because the acidity that makes tomatoes so useful in cooking is the same thing that makes them one of the most stable tinned products on the shelf. That brings us to number 14, canned tomatoes. The crop behind the tin still comes largely from southern Italy and Spain, regions that have swung between drought years and better ones over the past few seasons, so the price at the factory gate moves more than shoppers realise even when the shelf price looks steady. What actually separates a good tin from a poor one isn't the price, it's what's printed on the side. Whole plum tomatoes in juice are generally a better, less diluted product than the cheapest chopped varieties, which are often padded out with extra liquid. Buy the tins that name their region of origin, keep them somewhere cool, and treat a full shelf of these as the base of a dozen different meals rather than a single ingredient, from a Sunday pasta sauce to a weeknight chili to a soup that started as an accident and turned into a habit. Number 13, peanut butter. Peanuts are grown at scale in the US, Argentina, and increasingly China, and the crop is sensitive to two things most shoppers never think about: drought in the growing season and the shipping costs to move a heavy, oily commodity across oceans. A jar of proper peanut butter, the kind with peanuts and salt on the ingredients list and nothing else, can comfortably be kept for a year or more once opened and stored in a cool cupboard, without any real loss in quality. The category to watch is the no added sugar or high protein premium range, because those are the ones seeing the fastest price creep as demand for protein dense spreads climbs. Buy the plain whole peanut jar rather than the fortified version. It's cheaper, it lasts just as long, and the ingredients list is one line instead of 12. A kilo of basmati costs almost 3 times what a kilo of everyday long grain rice costs, and that gap has very little to do with quality. Number 12 is rice, and the price contrast between varieties tells you almost everything about how this market actually works. Basmati is grown almost entirely in a narrow belt of northern India and Pakistan, which means its price tracks 2 countries' weather and export policy, rather than the much broader global rice market that everyday long grain and jasmine rice draw from. White rice, kept dry and sealed, lasts for years, close to indefinitely, which makes it one of the cheapest genuine insurance policies in any kitchen. Brown rice is the exception. Its natural oils turn rancid within months, so it isn't a stock-up item the way white rice is. Store it airtight, drop in a bay leaf or two to keep weevils out of a large bag, and don't feel any pressure to pay the basmati premium for a rice you're planning to bulk store rather than serve at a dinner party. A few kilos of plain white rice, sealed properly, is about the cheapest genuine insurance you'll find on any shelf in this video. Number 11. Frozen vegetables. Vegetables are frozen within hours of harvest, which locks in vitamin content that a fresh vegetable sitting in a supermarket chiller for a week has often already lost. The category has faced real cost pressure from the electricity needed to run industrial freezing lines, but a bag of frozen peas, sweet corn, or mixed vegetables is still one of the cheapest ways to eat a genuinely nutritious meal. And unlike almost everything else on this list, there's no quality decay to worry about, only freezer space. Buy in bulk bags rather than small ones. The price per kilo drops sharply, and keep your freezer as full as you reasonably can. A fuller freezer is more energy efficient to run than a half-empty one. Have you noticed porridge oats getting pricier even though nothing seems to have gone wrong with the harvest? Here's what's actually happening. Number 10 is oats, and the real story isn't weather, it's competition for the same crop. Oat milk has gone from a niche product to a genuine mainstream category in under a decade, and every carton of it is made from oats that would otherwise have gone into porridge, granola, or flapjacks. The human food oat market is now quietly competing with the drinks aisle for the same Scottish and Northern English harvest, and that competition shows up as steady upward pressure on the humble bag of porridge oats. Sealed oats keep for the better part of a year in a cool, dry cupboard, so if porridge is a genuine staple in your house, this is worth stocking simply because the demand pulling against supply isn't going anywhere. And unlike most of the categories on this list, there's no single bad harvest that fixes this one. The drinks aisle simply isn't going back to being niche. You've probably seen the tinned fish trend online, sardines styled on a board with lemon and crackers like they're a delicacy rather than a cupboard staple. That renewed popularity is exactly why sardines take number 9. Behind the trend sits a less glamorous reality. Mackerel and sardine stocks in parts of the Atlantic have faced tighter catch quotas in recent years as regulators try to protect fish populations, and that tightening supply is meeting a wave of new demand from people who only discovered tinned fish because it looked good on a plate. The upside for shoppers who already knew this was a good staple is that the product itself hasn't changed. It's still cheap, it's still packed with omega-3, and it still lasts for years in the tin. Look for a clear catch method printed on the label, pole and line, or an MSC mark. And don't let a social media trend talk you into paying triple for a tin that used to sit quietly at 80 pence. That's 9 down and 6 to go, and before we carry on, a quick word. If this has already changed how you're thinking about your own cupboard, subscribe and stay tuned. There's a lot more still to come. Before we continue, I've spent years standing in supermarket aisles, so you don't have to. The supermarket method distills everything I've learned into one simple guide. Scan the QR code on your screen to grab your copy, and let's get back to the rankings. Now forget everything you've heard about stockpiling being about hoarding the exotic stuff. Number 8. Tinned soup is the plainest item on this entire list, and that's the point. It sits on the same vegetable and pulse cost base as several items already covered, so its price tends to move slowly and predictably rather than spiking. The genuine variation is in what's actually in the tin. Cheaper ranges lean heavily on water and starch thickener with a small amount of the named vegetable, while the better tins list a real vegetable as the first ingredient rather than water. Check the ingredients order, not the picture on the label. A shelf of a dozen tins costs less than one takeaway and will outlast any short-term price wobble in the vegetable aisle. Number 7. Vinegar. Nobody puts vinegar on a stockpile list, which is exactly why it belongs on this one. It's one of the only products in the entire supermarket with a genuinely indefinite shelf life. Its own acidity is a natural preservative, so a bottle bought this year will still be perfectly usable in 5. Distilled white vinegar for cleaning and pickling is astonishingly cheap and barely moves in price. Malt vinegar for your chips is nearly as stable. But specialty vinegars, balsamic in particular, carry real cost pressure because a genuine aged balsamic is tied to grape harvests in specific regions of Italy. So a bottle labelled simply balsamic style, cut with caramel colouring, is a different, cheaper product entirely. Buy the plain white and malt vinegar in bulk without a second thought, and save your money on the genuinely aged specialty stuff for when you actually need it. But there's a catch with the next one, and it's worth slowing down for. Number 6 is black pepper, and it's proof that a spice can behave exactly like a commodity crop. Black pepper hit record prices through 2026, with the benchmark Vietnamese grade climbing to levels not seen in nearly a decade. And Vietnam alone supplies well over a third of the entire world's pepper. The cause isn't weather this time, it's timing. Pepper vines take 3 to 4 years to reach full production, so the low planting decisions made years ago during a previous price crash are only showing up as a shortage now, which means this isn't a problem that reverses next season. Buy whole peppercorns rather than pre-ground pepper. Whole corns hold their oils and heat for years in a sealed jar, while ground pepper loses its punch within months. Here's a story almost nobody is telling. Number 5 is flour, plain and self-raising, and the reason it earns a genuinely positive slot is sitting in a field report most shoppers will never read. Early data on the UK's 2026 wheat harvest showed the best start to a crop in several years, with the vast majority of the country's winter wheat rated good to excellent heading into summer, a marked improvement on the tighter years before it. UK millers source the overwhelming majority of their wheat domestically, so a strong home harvest feeds through to calmer flour prices far faster than an imported commodity ever could. Production costs are still climbing in the background, fertilizer in particular, so this calm won't last forever. Flour keeps for the better part of a year in a sealed, dry container, so a couple of bags bought now, while the harvest news is genuinely good, is about as low risk a stock-up as this list gets. Number 4. Sugar. UK sugar beet growers have just been handed one of the lowest contract prices in years for the coming season, driven down by a glut in the world sugar market, and that's squeezing UK growers hard enough that some are expected to plant less beet next year rather than more. On paper, that sounds like bad news for future supply, and it might eventually be, but for now it means the raw cost behind your bag of sugar is about as cheap as it's been in a long while. Sugar doesn't spoil, doesn't need refrigeration, and will sit in a sealed container for years without losing anything. If the planted area really does shrink the way growers are signalling, this quiet, cheap window is unlikely to repeat itself for a couple of seasons, and this is where the ranking flips from cheap and calm to quietly vulnerable for the rest of the list. Number 3 is tea, and for a nation that treats a cup of tea as close to a human right, remarkably few people think about where the leaf actually comes from. The UK's tea supply leans heavily on Kenya and Sri Lanka, 2 countries whose harvests are governed by monsoon timing and altitude-specific growing conditions that shift from year to year in ways almost nobody outside the industry tracks. A poor monsoon in one of those 2 countries can tighten global tea supply within a single season. And because blended tea bags mix leaf from multiple origins to keep flavour consistent, price pressure on any one source eventually shows up in your regular box. Sealed tea bags easily keep their strength for well over a year. A few extra boxes, stored in a cool cupboard rather than next to the kettle where steam reaches it, is cheap insurance against a harvest problem you'd otherwise only read about after the price had already moved. It's an unglamorous thing to stock, but it's also one you'll actually use every single day, which is more than can be said for most items on a typical stockpile list. Number 2 is extra virgin olive oil, and we're putting it here deliberately, not the cheaper refined stuff, because a genuine extra virgin is both the healthier choice and, frustratingly, the one most worth understanding before you buy it. Real extra virgin olive oil is cold-pressed and unrefined, which preserves the polyphenols responsible for most of its health benefits, while bottles simply labelled olive oil or light are blends of refined oil with a small amount of virgin oil added back for flavour. But there's a catch. Olive oil fraud is one of the most well-documented problems in European food, with independent testing repeatedly finding bottles labelled extra virgin that have been cut with cheaper refined or seed oils to stretch the margin. Buy from brands that print a harvest date and country of origin rather than just a flag on the label. Store it in dark glass or tin away from light and heat. And treat the genuine article as worth the extra pound or two, because the cheaper bottle sitting next to it may not be delivering the health benefit you're actually paying for. Unopened, a genuine extra virgin will hold its character for up to 2 years, so this is one category where buying quality now genuinely pays off later. Number 1, and we end where every sensible cupboard should start: salt. It rarely gets a mention on lists like this because it rarely moves in price and it rarely runs short. And that, in a strange way, is exactly the point. Salt doesn't spoil in the way fresh food does, it doesn't need a freezer, and it doesn't depend on a single, fragile harvest or growing region the way pepper or tea can. As long as it's kept dry, it can sit in your cupboard for years without becoming unsafe to use. Unlike most pantry staples, there is very little risk that it will spoil, lose quality, or go to waste while it sits on the shelf. That makes it one of the safest items to keep an extra bag of on hand. It is the one item on this entire list where the regret isn't really about a price you missed or a discount that came along later. It's about getting halfway through a recipe, reaching for the salt, and realizing there's none left when you need it most. A couple of extra bags costs next to nothing, takes up almost no space, and quietly closes off one of the most basic ways a stocked cupboard can still let you down. Every other item on this list is about beating a price. This one is just about never being caught short. So here's the shape of the whole list. Beans, tomatoes, rice, frozen vegetables, tinned soup, vinegar, peanut butter, and salt are the reliable backbone. Cheap, long-lasting, and worth having a little extra of regardless of what the news says this month. Flour and sugar are riding a genuinely calm window right now, backed by a strong harvest and a soft beet contract which won't last into next year. Oats, sardines, black pepper, tea, and extra virgin olive oil are the ones sitting on a hidden vulnerability. Whether that's a trend eating into supply, a planting decision made years ago, or a fraud problem baked into the category itself. Here's the number that matters most out of everything in this video. Nearly every item above earns its place because a calm price today rarely means a calm price next year. It usually just means nobody has noticed the pressure building yet. Pepper is already mid-spike from a planting decision made years ago. Flour and sugar are calm for reasons that are already starting to reverse. The shoppers who do well over the next 12 months won't be the ones who panic bought everything in sight. They'll be the ones who quietly picked up an extra bag of the right things while nobody else was paying attention.